Picture the perfect crime scene, a perfectly normal suburban facade, hiding absolute horror complete with a shut garage door. Under the blazing midday Arizona sky, the street felt completely peaceful, while her most crucial belongings, phone, handbag, prescriptions, sat abandoned indoors. Her evening attire rested neatly in the closet, proving she had slipped into sleepwear right before an unknown force violently interrupted her life. Investigators discovered unlatched patio entrances alongside her confirmed DNA spattered across the stoop. Yet 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, a frail woman requiring daily medicine, had simply vanished. Let us rewind the tape completely. While armchair detectives focus on 9:48 p.m. on January 31st, official documents prove the sinister plot against her actually kicked off way before that evening drop-off. Media reports continually fail to emphasize this massive foundational detail when discussing the timeline. Hours prior to her supper outing on the morning of January 31st, locals actually spotted an incredibly shady car prowling around her block. Authorities definitively verified this peculiar sighting, highlighting it as a crucial puzzle piece in mapping out a dedicated stalking operation targeting her residence. She remained safe indoors during those early hours, long before summoning the rideshare that eventually whisked her away to Annie's place at 5:32 p.m. That mysterious automobile parked outside way before dusk ever fell, which radically shifts our entire understanding of how this calculated abduction actually unfolded. Those mysterious occupants were never just responding to her actions, they actively anticipated her every move. Stalkers set up camp nearby in broad daylight, studying her routines perfectly during the exact hours when her lifestyle habits were practically on public display. Tracking visitor flow, assessing peak, quiet hours, and scanning for witnesses strictly constitutes tactical recon, proving a predator was actively greenlighting their own sinister agenda. Detectives had already noted identical stalking patterns from almost 3 weeks earlier, specifically hitting the radar on January 11th and January 24th. Pima County authorities eventually issued incredibly precise pleas demanding localized security captures from the surrounding community. They begged for local video spanning January 11th from 9 p.m. until midnight, plus recordings from January 31st covering 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Rather than casting a wide net, law enforcement explicitly zeroed in on those exact chronological windows because they already possessed compelling internal intelligence. Police undeniably recognized significant events occurred, then leaving us wondering what exactly they hoped to validate. Pinpointing 3 exact days alongside narrow timeframes proves that local cops had firmly established a working hypothesis involving extensive preliminary stalking long before addressing the public. Having such rigid chronological parameters implies they uncovered shocking hidden truths or received explosive tips, prompting those highly targeted evidence demands. While these video solicitations remain officially documented, the underlying proof stays hidden. However, no department issues such laser-focused inquiries based on simple hunches alone. Hard facts and previously acquired clues drive these actions, revealing a preliminary stalking routine that forcefully alters our perspective on every single subsequent clue discovered. The perpetrator mercilessly monitored Nancy Guthrie for multiple weeks prior to striking, meaning their late-night, January 31st arrival was hardly an isolated visit. That fateful evening represented the ultimate climax of an intensive spying operation spanning over 20 days, stretching right up until the dawn of her vanishing. At exactly 5:32 p.m. on January 31st, Nancy grabbed a rideshare toward Annie's generating transit video that police wouldn't secure until 47 days afterward. Detectives openly admitted to dissecting every visual detail, continuously comparing the clips against verified prowler activities documented within that subdivision. Far beyond merely chronicling her final free moments, those recordings offer a dynamic geographic blueprint, exposing any rogue automobiles potentially shadowing her path during twilight. Waiting 47 days for that media constitutes a major clue. Nobody hid it purposefully, but authorities struggled to locate the chauffeur and submit formal requisitions. Consequently, throughout the initial 7 weeks, cops lacked total access to essential dashcam perspectives spanning 5:32 p.m. until 9:50 p.m. on January 31st. This precise chunk covering transportation, dining, and returning backward represents peak vulnerability, where stalkers surely escalated their pursuit, making those captured lenses absolutely vital evidence. What concluded as a vacant residence by February 1st definitely did not spark at 9:48 p.m., since validated files indicate sinister gears grinding 3 weeks prior. The exact same phantom monitoring the estate on January 11th returned boldly on January 24th, ultimately lurking nearby right when daylight broke on her final day. These shadowy figures absolutely understood their endgame. Later on February 5th, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos faced reporters to publicly establish the definitive sequence of events. Embedded within his authoritative law enforcement rundown sat a single phrase that the vast majority of journalists swallowed completely without asking any hard questions at all. Nanos declared that they presumed the elderly victim was safely indoors preparing for sleep, referencing the mechanical bay shutting definitively at 9:50 p.m. Using the verb presume acts as a structural foundation supporting this entire domestic kidnapping theory, complete Dali replace does policing hard evidentiary and she back mere speculation. Guessed. The commander deliberately utilized that exact phrasing when the portal secured itself, explicitly stating they merely figured she had returned inside to catch some shut-eye. Yet over the following weeks, storytellers stealthily erased that critical caveat from nearly every mainstream timeline reconstruction out there. Swapping it out for a definitive statement isn't some massive cover-up. Rather, it beautifully illustrates how our brains instinctively bandage missing logical links. People naturally patch holes utilizing whatever theories sound reasonable, eventually forgetting those informational voids ever existed in the first place. Society accepts these guesses as absolute gospel, even though an offhanded police briefing presumption falls drastically short of actual scientific certainty. With a mystery this deeply convoluted, any assumption, acting as a placeholder for truth, creates massive vulnerabilities, making it imperative we meticulously divide documented reality from pure guesswork immediately. Ultimately, the viral 8-wire 405 hypothesis, which racked up almost 6,000 clicks since March 31st, barely focuses on pinpointing her actual physical whereabouts. Instead, it critically examines the silent guesses masquerading as undeniable proof within mainstream lore. Stripping away those false certainties forces the entire chronology to completely shift shape. Digital lenses verify the entryway raising at 9:48 p.m. and dropping at 9:50 p.m., but assuming she walked indoors and stayed there is pure fiction, since only the motor's operation remains factual. Everyone just assumes she never left that house. Yet the only absolute certainty we have next is a masked figure haunting the front porch footage just past midnight. For 2 solid hours and 5 minutes after 9:50 p.m., the official timeline goes completely dark. There is absolutely zero digital footprint eyewitness account or hard evidence proving she actually remained indoors. Investigators have comfortably brushed off this window as dead time while she supposedly slept. However, a sleeping victim is merely a theory rather than a verified fact. People are simply plugging a massive 2-hour evidentiary black hole with guesswork. What we do know for certain is that the front porch lens went completely offline at exactly 1:47 a.m. But where does the guessing start? Authorities presume this intruder severed the feed himself, and they blindly trust the homeowner was trapped inside the residence when everything went black. The unvarnished truth is just a network failure. Detectives fabricated a tidy suspect and victim storyline to frame it, even though PCSD only verified a secondary sensor tripping at 2:12 a.m. The prevailing myth insists that movement belonged to our disguised prowler. Yet the sheriff openly admitted their technology was not sophisticated enough to tell a human from a wandering coyote. That represents the absolute limit of our hard evidence here. This was never a definitive shot of a kidnapper caught prowling on a backup lens, but rather an unexplained shadow lurking right inside the critical timeline that police still cannot clarify. The sole indisputable fact is her heart monitor software severing ties at 2:28 a.m. The public blindly accepts that she was violently ripped away from her mobile device right then. They also presume the handset was still resting securely indoors when the network dropped. Dropping a medical monitor connection strictly represents a severed wireless link. It only proves that a pair of electronics fell out of digital reach with one another. That technical glitch alone cannot pinpoint the physical location of either gadget during the outage. Furthermore, it offers zero insight into who might have been standing over them. Investigators did locate her mobile handbag and pills securely indoors. Finding her sleepwear is another indisputable truth, providing crucial focal points that anchor this entire investigation. We know for sure she slipped into something comfortable. All her personal items sat exactly where you would expect to find them before drifting off to sleep. The top cop firmly suspects she was snatched straight from her mattress. Such concrete details effectively shatter the wildest speculations floating around the @Hotwire 4 community. Yet despite those solid clues, the tangible forensics fail to establish the exact timing of the initial ambush. Could a phantom guest have already been lurking indoors during that 2-hour blackout? Did seeing that disguised stranger mark the exact kickoff of this nightmare? Or were we simply witnessing the middle chapter of a sinister plot already in motion? Her discarded clothes prove she stayed indoors just long enough to undress. However, they hardly guarantee she remained isolated, protected, or unharmed from the moment she parked until midnight, especially given the state of the rear exits. Suppose those patio sliders were cracked open way before her arrival. If that happened prior to 9:48 p.m., a trespasser had already breached the sanctuary long before she pulled into the driveway. She might have unknowingly strolled into a compromised residence, with its exits deliberately rigged by a waiting predator. Even in that chilling scenario, the sleepwear and purse would still be sitting right there. The tangible footprint left behind matches the current crime scene perfectly. Yet shifting that timeline flips the entire narrative of her final moments absolutely upside down. This is the exact mystery that the @Hotwire 405 hypothesis is desperately trying to untangle. Stripped of the crazy rumors, it forces us to look at the hardest angles. Nobody's arguing whether the homeowner was indoors because the clues confirm her arrival. The real mystery revolves around the terrifying events unfolding inside over those 2 quiet hours. Does that disguised figure knocking represent the opening salvo of this abduction? Or was he merely the visible tip of an iceberg masking a dark operation already tearing through the house? Practically every true crime breakdown analyzing this mystery points out the exact same glaring detail. This predator was incredibly calculated, highly equipped, and intimately familiar with the layout. Experts agree on this profile solely because the security tapes leave no room for debate. Still, the deeper psychological clues hidden within those video frames remain dangerously underexplored. Nobody has truly cross-referenced his peculiar movements against those massive chronological gaps. When you finally run that analysis, a terrifying new perspective emerges that mainstream media totally missed. The authorities absolutely verified his existence. We are tracking a 5'9" to 5'10" male with a typical frame wearing facial concealment and latex gloves. He carried a 25-liter outdoor rucksack, packed heat in a makeshift waistband rig, and the FBI officially branded him a prime kidnapping suspect. A legitimate suspect. Slipping onto the property deep into the night, he marched with zero hesitation straight toward the smart security lens. His initial strategy was to violently rip the electronics straight off the brickwork. After that trick completely failed, he seamlessly grabbed nearby botanical leaves to blind the optic sensor. Pivoting to those leaves reveals a meticulously rehearsed backup strategy. Amateurs do not casually invent brilliant detours on the porch. They engineer them well before leaving home. This phantom had to have clocked that specific planter way before the strike. He either scouted the stoop in person earlier or studied intense recon photos detailing every inch of the doorway. Just imagine the sheer calculation required to assault a residence at midnight armed with multiple tactical layers. Such precision demands either physical trespassing beforehand or obsessive visual stalking of the perimeter. You need prior intelligence realizing that ripping the casing loose might prove stubbornly difficult. It also means he knew exactly how far to stretch his arm to snatch those convenient leaves. Maintaining the icy nerve to carry dual operations mentally and pivot seamlessly requires extreme discipline. Random burglars hitting unfamiliar houses simply do not operate with military-grade fluidity. This prowler had mentally stood on that exact welcome mat 100 times before. He ran his dark rehearsals perfectly, ensuring his escape hatch was polished long before the crisis hit. The system eventually flatlined at 1:47 a.m. That blackout hit nearly 2 full hours after his haunting silhouette first materialized on the porch. How did he burn through all that empty time? Video catches him fiddling with the lens, but loitering for 2 hours outside a suburban entryway is an agonizingly long stakeout. Could he have been pausing for a green light from an accomplice? Maybe he stood guard outside, while absolute hell broke loose indoors, or perhaps an unseen partner digitally severed the video feed. Forget the disguised stalker trying to pry the plastic loose with his hands. This feels more like a deliberate cyber kill switch flipped from deep within the local Wi-Fi. The hardware itself never actually suffered any blunt force trauma. The sheriff officially went on record stating the gadget was never shattered or pulverized into pieces. It simply dropped offline, which is a massive detail. Smashing a lens with a hammer screams brute force panic, whereas quietly severing a digital link whispers sophisticated sabotage. A tech-savvy intruder could easily bypass security if they hijacked the broadband. They might have unplugged the main hub in the living room or ruthlessly jammed the wireless frequency from the street. Each theory violently shifts our understanding of exactly who breached those walls and when. Ex-FBI veteran Raymond Carr publicly announced to News Nation that those rear sliders were never used for a getaway. That raid totally flips the script. Those access points reveal exactly how a whole crew slipped inside. Forget the theory about the rear door being a getaway route. Without a doubt, that was ground zero for the break-in. Ex-tactical leader Bob Cater completely backs up Carr's theory about the perpetrators escaping via the main entrance. You cannot argue with the bloody evidence left on the steps, especially when the backyard landscape is basically an unnavigable trap. 2 brilliant investigative minds reached the exact same conclusion here. The attackers breached the rear, bolted out the main doors, and executed a highly coordinated nightmare requiring a well-oiled team juggling multiple tasks at once. Should Carr be correct, the tactical blueprint is chilling. Breach the rear strike inside, then vanish out the main doors. We clearly see the disguised suspect on the porch simply because he stepped right into the lens's view. Meanwhile, the accomplices slipping through the rear vanished completely since absolutely no surveillance video exists for the yard. Security professionals already verified that the main perimeter fence is practically impenetrable from the street. That proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that our disguised suspect never could have smashed his way in solo. Anyone coming through those main doors absolutely needed an inside man unlocking things for them. Slipping through the rear meant those entrances were purposefully left ajar beforehand. Former Pima County murder investigator Kurt Dabb pushed this chilling theory even further. Speaking with Parade magazine, he confidently estimated a crew of 2 to 4 suspects pulled off this abduction. His logic is bulletproof. Coordinating a nightmare of this scale is mathematically impossible for a lone wolf. Dragging an 84-year-old hostage, especially a physically impaired victim who was likely tied up across a dark home at midnight, is tough enough. Dodging outdoor cameras simultaneously absolutely demands a full crew. Ex-federal investigator Carr echoed that exact sentiment. Pulling off a heist like this solo would be entirely out of the question for anyone. Think about a coordinated team utilizing prepped entryways. One disguised lookout handles the street view while his crew violently sweeps the rooms. Verified clues point directly toward this highly structured battle plan. And make no mistake, a blueprint like this was never cobbled together on January 31st. This was meticulously premeditated. Verified facts buried inside those extortion letters carry massive weight. In fact, they might totally blow the lid off the central mystery we are unpacking here today. At least a single message dropped chillingly accurate facts regarding New York's property layout and her exact outfit before vanishing. Around the same time, a local Tucson CBS station caught a bizarre piece of mail. TMZ caught a drop too. One demand featured a hard countdown for February 9th at 5 in the evening, asking for $6 million in Bitcoin alongside a designated wallet link. Federal agents dug in and treated several of these threats as genuine. Sure, they eventually busted a fraudster for forging one message, but that bust ignores the other letter loaded with impossibly accurate property and wardrobe facts. A phony cash grab and a letter dripping with inside knowledge are entirely distinct things. To this day, authorities have completely avoided telling the public if that second terrifying document was genuine or fake. Just think about the sheer logistics required to draft a threat with that much precision, only to successfully deliver it to a newsroom under 24 hours after the hit. The mastermind had to write the thing, send it out, and somehow juggle a chaotic hostage scenario simultaneously. They pulled this off either mid-kidnapping or seconds after the dust settled. You do not see that kind of calculated multitasking from an amateur acting on impulse. That screams of a professional who built their entire extortion template long before the sun ever went down. Sure, the granular facts like her outfit and room layouts were plugged in at the last second, but the foundational trap was set way earlier. What kind of trap, you ask a fully operational Bitcoin ledger? They crunched the numbers on exactly how much cash the victims could realistically drain. They mathematically timed the ticking clock based on liquidation speeds. Then they hit multiple news desks at once to guarantee a massive viral spread. Flooding the zone to hit maximum eyeballs guarantees ultimate psychological warfare. Pulling off a stunt like that demands serious preliminary legwork, meaning zero chance someone drafted this while fleeing a fresh kidnapping scene. You simply do not invent an extortion demand featuring hard crypto links and ticking clocks on a whim. The whole thing was pre-packaged with the ransom price permanently locked in. All that digital money plumbing was laid down early. Picking the Guthries was a tactical move exploiting Savannah's massive fame, entirely fueled by deep dives into their private bank accounts. Cameron Guthrie essentially admitted this when his sibling point-blank asked him, "Am I the reason this nightmare happened?" His heartbreaking reply was simply, "Yeah, most likely." Vetting a mark, stalking their relatives, and running the numbers on their net worth is absolutely impossible to pull off in a single evening. That level of stalking takes weeks to perfect. Spying on them during January 11th, the 24th, and finally the morning of the 31st leaves a blatant paper trail of their reconnaissance. That extortion letter proves exactly what their creepy homework was building toward all along. Just look at the deeply personal secrets leaked regarding her clothing. The intimate house details prove the author held secrets obtained through intense stalking, a previous break-in, or a traitor within her circle. Then right on March 31st, an internet user named Hotwire405 dropped a wild hypothesis. It racked up almost 6,000 hits before any mainstream sleuths could even wrap their heads around it. The sensational rumor claiming Nancy never made it back clashes violently with rock-solid facts. Investigators found her personal items indoors, and she was clearly dressed for bed. Authorities firmly stated she was snatched straight from her mattress. The nuts and bolts timeline theories completely fall apart against those solid facts. However, there is a much sharper angle to this hypothesis. This darker angle completely ignores the debate about her pulling into the driveway at 9:50 in the evening. Shockingly, nobody is talking about this specific angle. So let me hit you with the real mystery driving today's deep dive. What if the woman who stepped out for supper at 5:32 that January 31st evening vanished forever? Do not get it twisted, her physical body definitely walked through those doors again. The scattered possessions guarantee that fact. We know for sure she navigated those hallways. That is an absolute certainty. Yet the carefree spirit she embodied earlier that day was a woman living blissfully unaware before the nightmare swallowed her whole. That innocent version of her never crossed the threshold again. Once those driveway gates shut at 9:50 that night, the ambush was already suffocating her rather than silently waiting. This psychological shift is exactly what mainstream media completely glossed over regarding the Hotwire 405 post. Everyone else foolishly wasted their breath arguing over the basic physical timeline instead. Did her car park safely? Did they find her purse? What is the official police stance? Sure, those basic answers are factually true, yet terribly hollow. They tackle an entirely irrelevant puzzle. Shifting the timeline creates a totally different beast. The real horror is wondering exactly how many hours this poor lady spent trapped in a scheme she could not even see. Just how many days did they spend weaving a trap around her existence, tracking her routines, mapping her estate, and weaponizing her daughter's fame long before the January 31st green light dropped? The hard evidence paints a grim picture. Try January 11th, a full 3 weeks earlier. Prowlers were already lurking in the dark. They returned January 24th and again by dawn on January 31st. A phantom car stalked her street long before she grabbed that evening meal. From there, they monitored her rideshare, calculated her exact arrival, popped the rear hinges open, and fully drafted their bloody extortion demands. The absolute terrifying reality is that by 9:50 p.m., her attackers weren't just arriving. Predators spent 20 days hovering nearby, tracking her every move since January 11th, 3 weeks prior to the abduction. January 24th brought them back around, and they lingered nearby on the 31st while their target remained indoors. Her 5:32 p.m. rideshare was entirely anticipated as the perpetrators clearly realized she was visiting Annie. The kidnappers accurately predicted her exact return time, waiting for that final barrier to descend at 9:50 p.m. That precise moment triggered the final phase of a weeks-long plot asking, was she ever truly safe inside? Following that 9:50 p.m. cutoff, or was this horrible tragedy completely orchestrated and moving forward long beforehand? When the entrance locked at 9:50 p.m., did it provide shelter or trap her within a 3-week conspiracy? Finding the answer goes far beyond wondering if she wore sleepwear when the disguised intruder finally approached her porch. We must determine if those preceding 2 hours provided actual peace or merely initiated a carefully staged ambush surrounding her. Consider the intentionally unlatched rear entrance, the heavy iron gate, defeating the solo intruder, and the cleverly utilized garden cover. A pre-written extortion demand awaited transmission while constant stalking plagued her for 20 days, right up until that final morning. Such chilling details completely contradict any theory of a spontaneous assault, starting the moment a disguised figure triggered the camera. Rather, everything strongly indicates an extensive ongoing plot was fully active before Nancy returned. She unknowingly stepped directly into an established snare rather than being randomly hunted down. Therefore, the most revealing aspect of this ongoing probe is not whatever statements law enforcement chooses to release publicly. The actual search locations speak volumes as geographical focus constantly mirrors the working theories held by seasoned detectives tracking leads. You always funnel your manpower straight toward the most logical destination along the criminal pathway. Having FBI Director Kash Patel physically visit Tucson breaks all normal protocol since agency heads usually manage things from Washington. His boots on the ground prove they uncovered something demanding extreme, high-level supervision. Deciding to bring the top executive onto the active scene happened very early in the timeline. Federal agents later shifted focus northward toward Phoenix, leveraging its massive international transit networks. Relocating immense investigative power to that specific city sends an undeniably massive geographical message. Whatever thread detectives are pulling has definitely traveled north, prompting joint briefings about suspect videos for cops spanning the U.S.-Mexico line. Such international coordination represents typical protocol whenever authorities suspect fugitives might flee south, considering Tucson rests roughly 60 miles away. Official tactical choices confirm their current search parameters completely swallow up that massive southern transit artery. Choppers carried specialized tracking equipment perfectly tuned to catch the unique electromagnetic pulse emitted by Nancy's exact pacemaker variant. Utilizing this aerial hardware strongly suggests a specific territorial theory. Aerial scanners only fly when rescue teams assume the victim survives nearby stranded, somewhere vulnerable to high-altitude frequency detection. Utilizing such advanced methods clearly shows detectives knew her location was somewhere far away from the initial residential crime scene. Launching those airborne trackers immediately expanded the hunting grounds well beyond her local streets into a much broader airborne grid. Consider the Madres Buscadores de Sonora, a Mexican civilian recovery team famously adept at unearthing victims missed by standard police. They specifically journeyed into Arizona, offering help before facing immediate rejection from local deputies. Having an international civilian coalition cross borders just to join this hunt highlights a vital geographical angle involving southern territories. This specific transnational element truly represents a crucial puzzle piece that mainstream media coverage has unfortunately ignored entirely. We are not discussing locals from Phoenix or Flagstaff. These trackers crossed an international boundary. They mobilized because complex abductions along this specific desert corridor fall perfectly within their core expertise. Meanwhile, federal authorities also officially confirmed utilizing advanced genetic genealogy analysis during their probe. This tactic involves mapping genetic lineages from crime scene samples to hunt down perpetrators using their distant family connections. Detectives pivot to this grueling strategy after standard federal databases strike out exactly like the recovered glove swab did. While undeniably slower than traditional swabbing, this revolutionary technique routinely cracks impossible mysteries spanning generations. Employing this exact scientific method loudly broadcasts their unwavering belief that these biological clues lead somewhere. They will fiercely chase that microscopic thread indefinitely until justice is served no matter the timeline. Furthermore, consider the digital extortion blueprint. Blasting a $6 million cryptocurrency ultimatum and strict countdown across multiple newsrooms proves the mastermind possesses serious technical savvy alongside vast international operational reach. Cryptocurrency completely ignores global boundaries, making local extortion wallets function flawlessly from foreign soil. Therefore, whatever evil sparked on that quiet residential street was never meant to stay contained locally. Review the vast search perimeter, international police briefings, northward shifts, and aerial scanning missions. The involvement of foreign citizen trackers proves it expanded outward. Every single detail from the director's flight to specialized tech and ancestral mapping screams complexity. Witnessing foreign rescue squads crossing boundaries strictly to help proves authorities are actively battling a highly coordinated multi-layered syndicate based on solid physical evidence. These predators were highly mobile. You simply never deploy this massive arsenal for a random street thug who impulsively ambushed an 84-year-old victim's closing garage. This unprecedented reaction only happens when detectives realize the culprits have possessed immense financial backing, meticulous planning, and vast logistical networks to vanish across state lines afterward. This ultimately brings us right back to our core timeline mystery. Masterminding something this sophisticated never spontaneously kicks off at 9:50 p.m. The nightmare didn't truly start when a faceless goon triggered the porch lens. The actual inception happened during their rigorous preliminary stalking phase. It started the second a predator marked Nancy Guthrie methodically calculating her property's blind spots. They ruthlessly concluded that targeting this specific household, largely due to her daughter, promised a lucrative score. Stalking began long before the public record marked January 11th as the very first known surveillance date. Glaring mysteries still linger in the official timeline, completely ignored by every single media briefing. Investigators are tearing apart rideshare video secured 47 days post-vanishing, desperately hunting for clues on the drive from Annie's place to New York. They need to know if any cars shadowed that route on the night of January 31st, potentially pushing the stalking window way before the 9:50 p.m. mark back to 5:32 p.m. or prior. Official findings remain heavily guarded as the deep dive continues. Who actually drove that mysterious ride spotted nearby the morning of January 31st before Nancy dined out, and does it link back to the disguised intruder? Could it tie into the aggressive scouting from January 11th or January 24th? Or perhaps lead to other players in this expanding criminal web? It is wild how this critical daytime spotting flies entirely under the radar, even though detectives admit it forms a massive chunk of their stalking timeline. Pinning down the exact moment those rear exits were left ajar is crucial. That one detail completely settles the fierce argument between the infiltration and escape theories. Finding them wedged open prior to 9:50 p.m. guarantees intruders breached the perimeter well before she even pulled into the garage. Should that breach happen after she settled indoors, we must figure out who opened them and how. Law enforcement holds that secret tight. That baffling 2:12 a.m. motion notification raises serious alarms. Which lens caught the movement? What area was breached? And was it just wildlife or our disguised prowler? Could it be an accomplice dragging the victim away? This terrifying blip lands precisely 25 minutes, post-camera failure, and just 16 minutes before her heart monitor flatlined. That unknown trigger is undeniably tied to the foul play, yet authorities stay utterly silent about it. Then there is the massive internal forensic sweep of her residence. Complex genetic traces lifted from the estate flew out to a specialized facility in Florida. Despite a reported testing bottleneck, technicians promise they are grinding through the swabs. Once those verified profiles drop, they will paint a far more vivid picture of the indoor struggle than the naked eye ever could. We are still waiting on those crucial lab sheets. They undoubtedly represent the most vital hidden clues in this entire hunt, aside from that earlier porch arrival. Major news outlets all verified a snapshot of the porch taken way before February 1st. Meanwhile, the local sheriff flat out denied having proof of any such recording. Both sides might actually be telling the truth here. Insiders often leak solid intel long before police go officially on the record, leaving us with a very solvable technical mystery. We just need the hidden digital footprint stamped onto those salvaged snapshots. That timestamp data either survives perfectly intact or it vanished forever. Honestly, both outcomes crack the case wide open. Every single query unlocks another shadowy layer of this coordinated hit. Once handcuffs click, legal papers drop, or detectives finally spill the beans, that hazy 2-hour blackout will instantly transform from a forgotten footnote into a blazing spotlight. It becomes the ultimate focal point of the active strike, given that early clues constantly hinted at an incredibly sophisticated plot. Let us loop back to square one, where a perfectly normal-looking house quietly hid her abandoned mobile device. They found her handbag, pills, and evening wear left behind, proving she had slipped into sleepwear and tucked herself away. Red stains stained the yard near busted rear entryways, while the 9:50 p.m. garage shutdown tricked everyone into thinking the horror had not begun yet. Fast forward 60 days and that entire belief system crumbles, though not exactly how the viral 405 rumor suggested. The trap literally closed around her after 3 weeks of intense observation and a perfectly synchronized nighttime raid. That 2-hour stretch between her arrival and the prowler showing up was buzzing with sinister activity. We are looking at the critical strike zone of a 21-day plot finally unleashing hell. The rear entryways sat prime for a break-in. The extortion letter was already pinned. The ruthless orchestrators lurked just inches from her property line. Meanwhile, the victim casually returned from a family meal, swapping her evening outfit for comfy nightwear. She walked blindly into a meticulously laid trap. Local brass firmly believed she was snatched straight from her mattress. Yet her fate was sealed long before she ever ordered appetizers that evening. They even established a digital drop wallet before she hailed her rideshare. The perpetrators unlatched the hinges and figured out their extortion timeline before her vehicle even rolled into safety. Her sleeping quarters just happened to be the final extraction point of a dark campaign launched on January 11th. That viral 405 internet rumor loudly questioned whether she ever even made it indoors. The raw footage finally puts that exact debate to rest. She definitely returned to her residence. Sadly, the entire building was already compromised and crawling with danger. Looking at raw facts without falling for the lazy assumptions pushed by mainstream media reveals a stark truth. The second that barrier shut at 9:50 p.m., her chances of survival hit absolute zero. The actual point of no return happened weeks prior, not during the midnight breach. Her destiny shifted the very first night a stalker cruised past her lawn and marked her for doom. That realization destroys the old timeline, making her final steps inside completely irrelevant. We must face the horrifying reality of how long the crosshairs rested squarely on her back before she ever felt watched. Every single installment of our investigation leans heavily on verified truth while owning up to the blind spots. Tonight is absolutely no exception to that rule. That wild 405 conspiracy definitely provokes some incredibly valid doubts. But stacking it against cold hard facts and the irrefutable trail of her abandoned possessions tells a different story. Her sleepwear, the sheriff's gut feeling, verified stalking logs, and the undeniable proof of a coordinated crew all paint a terrifyingly clear picture. Unraveling the extortion network and the massive search grid reveals a chilling truth. The most plausible theory remains absolutely unrefuted. We have refined, expanded, and rooted this case in solid facts that the media completely ignored, proving verified surveillance began 3 weeks before January 31st. What the public desperately needs, crucial answers highlighted throughout this breakdown, precisely what that rideshare dash camera captured near Annie's residence, that fateful night. If authorities successfully tracked that January 31st morning car and linked it to the wider stalking network, precisely when those rear entryways were wedged open, and whether that happened before Nancy arrived or afterward. Whatever tripped that 2:12 in the morning secondary motion sensor, and if investigators proved it was human wildlife, or entirely different. We must know what those internal crime scene lab reports from Florida finally revealed post-delay. Plus, did the porch camera's digital footprint firmly settle the earlier trespassing debate? Either way, detectives hold these critical truths behind closed doors, just waiting to emerge via media briefings, arrests, or legal filings. My platform stands ready to analyze every update. Find all related broadcasts saved in our custom playlist and click the upcoming video. Nancy Guthrie vanished more than 2 months ago, leaving her desperate relatives waiting while federal agents continuously work this highly active case. Verified evidence paints a chilling picture, an extensively planned, highly calculated abduction performed by individuals who meticulously studied their target weeks beforehand. Tracking these perpetrators means acknowledging the true origin point, which wasn't 9:50 at night on January 31st, nor was it midnight, but a full 3 weeks earlier. The terrifying mystery spanning the 2 hours between the garage incident and the disguised intruder isn't found there. The nightmare truly kicked off on January 11th. Hard proof signaled this exact origin during the initial police briefing concealed perfectly within a single term, the sheriff muttered, and everyone forgot. Behind every mystery is a lesson society cannot afford to ignore. Vulnerable people need more than sympathy. They need protection, attention, and action. The story above reminds us how easily danger can hide behind an ordinary neighborhood, a quiet evening, or a routine day. Evil does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it studies weights and takes advantage of loneliness, age, and silence. The deepest educational message here is this: never treat assumptions as truth. In moments of crisis, rumors spread fast, but facts save lives. Careful observation, community awareness, and respect for evidence matter because one small detail can change everything. Just as important, older adults should never be left invisible in our busy world. A missed call, an unusual car, an unlocked door, or a broken routine should never be dismissed as unimportant. This is also a call for compassion. Check on the elderly. Notice what seems out of place. Build neighborhoods where people look out for one another. Safety begins long before a tragedy happens. A strong community is not only measured by how it reacts to fear, but by how faithfully it protects the fragile, speaks up for the voiceless, and refuses to let truth be buried in silence.